Welcome to Messy Christian Mamas. We are three Christian moms with a progressive mindset and loving hearts and minds. We are imperfect humans, but we're all loved in God's sight. At some point, we've all felt like the church and Christianity may not have been for us, but God isn't looking for perfection. He's just looking for you.
We are not experts in Christian theology, and we do not represent any particular Christian faith or church. We are simply here to be authentic, and we hope you join us on this journey.
Mamas, we're so glad that you're here. We have a fun episode, I hope, for you guys today. I should probably not say fun, knowing what's in store.
Oh my goodness.
But
is it Noah?
This is Kendra.
Again. This is Kaylee.
And this is Ashley.
And we're happy to be here with you. I still have this cold, so I still sound stuffy, and so you can really tell the difference between Kendra and Ashley today. So our topic today, this is Help Me Understand the Bible Part 2. Our first installment of this series was all about a very confusing story dealing with Noah, his son Ham, and Noah's curse on Ham's son Canaan. If you didn't hear that one, NSFW, it is a wild ride.
It is.
Yeah. So this time around, I have a whole new passage that thoroughly confounded me. And are you ready for me to share?
Yeah.
Yes.
Seriously?
Let's
okay.
go.
I mean,
Am I going to put an E on this episode for explicit?
Trigger warning, maybe. Judges 19. This is from Judges 19. It's all from the Old Testament because the Old Testament is so confusing, and there's just so many stories. You're like, why? That sounds heinous. Anyway, okay, so Judges 19. This is from the Amplified Version of the Bible, and it's kind of a long passage. It's the entire chapter, but I feel like I have to tell the whole story, you guys, okay? All right. Now it happened in those days when there was no king in Israel that a certain Levite living as an alien in the most remote part of the hill country of Ephraim, who took a concubine for himself from Bethlehem in Judah. But his concubine was unfaithful to him and left him and went to her father's house in Bethlehem of Judah and stayed there for a period of 4 months. Then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly and tenderly to her in order to bring her back, taking with him his servant and a pair of donkeys. So she brought him into her father's house, and when the father of the girl saw him, he was happy to meet him. So his father-in-law, the girl's father, detained him, and he stayed there with him for 3 days. So they ate and drank, and he lodged there. On the 4th day, they got up early in the morning, and the Levite prepared to leave. But the girl's father said to his son-in-law, "Strengthen yourself with a piece of bread, and afterward go on your way." So both men sat down and ate and drank together. And the girl's father said to the man, "Please be willing to spend the night and enjoy yourself." Then the man got up to leave, but his father-in-law urged him strongly to remain, so he spent the night there again. On the 5th day, he got up early in the morning to leave, but the girl's father said, "Please strengthen yourself and wait until the end of the day." So both of them ate. When the man and his concubine and his servant got up to leave, his father-in-law, the girl's father, said to him, "Behold, now the day is drawn to a close. Please spend the night. Look, now the day comes to an end. Spend the night here and celebrate. Enjoy yourself. Then tomorrow you may get up early for your journey and go home." But the man was not willing to stay the night, so he got up and left and came to a place opposite Jebus, that is Jerusalem. Side note, Jebus, I always feel like Homer Simpson. Have you guys seen that episode of The Simpsons where he's on the plane and he says, "Help me, Jebus"? Anyway, I think about it every time. So, all right. Back to Judges 19. With him were 2 saddled donkeys and his servant and his concubine. When they were near Jebus, again, the day was almost gone, and the servant said to his master, "Please come and let us turn aside into this Jebusite city and spend the night in it." But his master said to him, "We will not turn aside into a city of foreigners who are not of the sons, descendants of Israel. We will go on as far as Gibeah." And he said to his servant, "Come and let us approach one of these places, and we will spend the night in Gibeah, here we go again. Drink up. Or in Ramah. So they passed by and went on their way, and the sun set on them near Gibeah, which belongs to the tribe of Benjamin, and they turned aside there to go in and spend the night in Gibeah. And the Levite went in and sat down in the open square of the city, because no man invited them into his house to spend the night. Then, behold, there was an old man who was coming out of the field from his work at evening. He was from the hill country of Ephraim, but was staying in Gibeah, and the men of the place were sons, descendants of Benjamin. When he looked up, he saw the traveler and his companions in the city square, and the old man said, "Where are you going, and where do you come from?" The Levite replied, "We are passing through from Bethlehem in the territory of Judah to the most remote part of the hill country of Ephraim. I am from there. I went to Bethlehem of Judah, but I am now going home to my house, and there is no man in the city who will take me into his house for the night. Yet we have both straw and feed for our donkeys, and also bread and wine for me and for your handmaid or concubine, and for the young man who is with your servant. There is no lack of anything." Then the old man said, "Peace be to you, only leave all your needs to me, and do not spend the night in the open square." So he brought him into his house and fed the donkeys, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. So here's where the story takes a little bit of a turn. So I'm just going to warn you, this is a little bit of a trigger warning about maybe sexual assault. So I'm just going to put that out there. While they were celebrating, behold, men of the city, certain worthless and evil men, surrounding the house, pounding on the door, and they spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, "Bring out the man who came to your house, so that we may have relations with him." Then the man, the master of the house, went out and said to them, "No, my fellow citizens, please do not act so wickedly. Since this man has come to my house as my guest, do not commit the sacrilege. Here is my virgin daughter and this man's concubine. I will bring them out now, abuse and humiliate them, and do to them whatever you want, but do not commit this act of sacrilege against this man." But the men would not listen to him. So the man took the Levite's concubine and brought her outside to them, and they had relations with her and abused her all night until morning. And when daybreak came, they let her go. At daybreak, the woman came and collapsed at the door of the man's house, where her master was, until it was fully light. When her master got up in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go on his way, he saw his concubine lying at the door of the house, and her hands were on the threshold. He said to her, "Get up and let us go." But there was no answer, for she had died. Then he put her body on the donkey, and the man left and went home. When he arrived at his house, he took a knife, and taking hold of his dead concubine, he cut her corpse limb by limb into 12 pieces, and sent her body parts throughout all the territory of Israel. All who saw the dismembered parts said, "Nothing like this has ever happened or been seen from the day that the sons of Israel came up from the land of Egypt to this day. Consider it, take counsel, and speak your minds." So, Judges 20, I'm not going to read any of it, but I'll give you just a quick Cliff's Notes. What then happens directly after this is all the tribes gather, except for the tribe of Benjamin. That area of Gibeah in which the events transpired was in the tribe of Benjamin, and agree to go and send men throughout the tribe of Benjamin, asking them to give up these men from Gibeah. The tribe of Benjamin refuses, so the rest of the tribes of Israel decide to go to war with the tribe of Benjamin. They go to God asking, the other 11 tribes, they go to God asking which tribe they should send first, and God says to send Judah. Judah had lost God's favor, and Judah lost 22,000 men in battle against the tribe of Benjamin. Then the rest of the tribes go back to God asking if they should still battle against the tribe of Benjamin. God says yes, and then they lost 18,000 more men. Only then is the tribe of Benjamin defeated after that. So, help me understand why so
much.
horrifically violent and cruel, and like
Yeah.
what are we supposed to learn from this?
Also, why do we have to know that they're staying at the father-in-law's house? Why is the father-in-law trying to get them to stay 2 extra days? And like, why is that a part of the story?
Absolutely.
I'm so distracted.
Like, it's such a
I'm like, that's like
misdirection.
such a plot point. It's like these really esoteric movies that win like best Oscar, and I was like, oh my god, it's such a great movie, and I watch it, and I'm like, I have to be missing.
I don't understand.
a major plot
If
point.
he had stayed there, then maybe that would not have happened if he had stayed at the first.
Maybe
I don't know.
like accept hospitality. Is that the lesson, and then you won't go to war? Like,
Was the
Lord.
Levite then rewarded in cutting off Benjamin from the tribes of Israel? He made so many awful and, like, in my opinion, just immoral decisions throughout the course of this,
Is
right?
this before or after Lot?
Why do we not see his punishment? This is after Lot.
Okay, so this is like a repeat.
Some of the interpretations do actually say that is the case.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like it's a direct repetition of history.
Like, it's just so horrific. Like, this guy, first, he...
Okay, well, first of all, is it his concubine or his wife? Or are they the same thing? Because it says father-in-law.
So concubines, in the Amplified version of the Bible, it says that a concubine is like a wife, but, like, not from the same social class, not from the same class, and so it's like a lesser wife that has lesser privilege, essentially.
Okay, so he goes to his wife's house. Like, she decides, so she leaves him.
She
to
leaves
go
him. Now,
to her father's house.
It says because she was unfaithful, but then there are some interpretations of this that actually say prostitute, that she prostituted herself. But there's some interpretations that say that the use of the word prostitute was more of a metaphor and not actually a sexual crime, because then she would have been punishable by death for doing that, and her father wouldn't have taken her in, and he certainly wouldn't have gone to the father-in-law's house.
I mean, her husband sounds like an absolute peach. It sounds like he kind of like,
here you go.
Yeah, like she was a party.
Or the
trick.
old man is like offering her up, and he's like, yeah, cool, whatever, I'm gonna go hit the hay.
Yeah, like,
when I get up the next day.
Like, so you just meet this random stranger in the square where you're just gonna sleep outside. So you're like, whatever, it's okay. There's no room at the inn. Whatever, I'll just sleep outside with my concubine and my servant and my servant's friend and these two donkeys. We're like comfortable. And then this old man out of nowhere is like, hey, you should come stay with me. I'll take care of all of your needs. That sounds sus. Like, that's just,
the whole thing.
sure.
I'm like,
that's
a white van. That is a white van candy situation. Like that was like the pre, like the ancient version. Exactly. Like, and then you're just gonna like let this old man offer up your wife and his virgin daughter.
And his virgin daughter. And the guy, the master, the guy is just like, yeah, whatever. There's no argument from him here.
Well, I'm like, who is this Levite because, like, does the old man, like, have eyes for this Levite? Because he's like, no. Not him. Don't touch him. But his wife and my daughter. Go to town.
Yeah, and then when her master got up in the morning, after his wife had been...
Oh my gosh, new day, new me, open the door, there she is.
Brutally raped and assaulted.
Her fingers, like, clinging to the threshold, and he's like, oh man, now I have to deal with this. Like, there's no remorse.
I mean... Not on his part.
No,
he's like,
because
this is
then
a horrible act. I'm going to cut up her body into 12 pieces to show Israel how terrible this is.
Was he assuming that was not happening? No.
I'm so glad that we have Facebook now. Like, we don't have to, like, cut up bodies in order to, like, we just put out a post being like, this terrible thing happened.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the interpretations that I found. This is a brutal one, you guys. I'm sorry, but I read it when I was reading this. I don't know, it was like a couple months ago. I was like, why? Why? What do you want me to learn from this, God? Okay, so this is from my favorite resource, Bible Hermeneutics, and a user by the name of Kathy Gill. So she says the concubine in chapter 19 is a picture of Israel's Levite leadership because she begins by prostituting herself. After Elijah called down fire from heaven on Mount Carmel, Israel never again practiced idolatry. This parallels the concubine going home to her father. The Levite went to get her after 4 months. Jesus came in year 4,000. The father seemed to know what would happen and delayed their leaving until it was late. There's a period of history called the Dark Ages. The Levite's servant suggested stopping for the night in Jerusalem, but was told it's full of foreigners. A hint of a future when Jerusalem would again be filled with foreigners. The Levite stops in Gibeah, and the residents want to have sex with the Levite, reminiscent of Sodom and Gomorrah. The concubine is given to the residents of Gibeah.
Hold on. Yeah. He doesn't want to stop in Jerusalem because it's full of foreigners, but then he goes stays in the stranger's house.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But it's not a stranger, I guess, because they're all descendants of Israel. Anyway. Okay. The text is vague about her death, suggesting it's a result of violent, perverted sex accompanied by beating. The Levite cuts her into 12 pieces and sends each piece to one of the tribes. At that point, the concubine lost her identity except for her head. The Jews were outraged at the manner of her death, saying such a thing has never been done or even heard of. The 12 tribes comprise one nation, Israel. Israel decided to cut out part of their body, the tribe of Benjamin, and subsequently lost their identity. Today, Jews do not know their tribal affiliation except for the head. Some of the Levites can trace their identity. It is helpful to see who Benjamin is, the second son of Jacob and Rachel. The first son, Joseph, is a picture of Jesus in his first coming. Benjamin is a picture of Jesus in his second coming. In the first century, the religious leaders, the Levites, rejected Jesus' claim to be the Messiah. Their reasoning, delivered quite passionately, referred to the manner of Jesus' death, saying such a thing has never been done before or even heard of.
That's not true, because it had been done before. These people don't know their own history, and that is what the big problem is. This is just, as a history major, this just bothers me on so many levels. Like, I cannot stand it when people are like, we don't know how this happened. This has never happened before. Yes, it has.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, it has. It might not be in, like, the majority version of things, but it has happened. Oh, it bothers me so much.
So it was all just symbolism?
I know, well, like...
if it is, God, that's really freaking harsh symbolism.
I need to, like, rip my brain out and rearrange it to really understand all of the symbolism.
That's like a really cryptic symbolism. Like, that's a puzzle. But then it's also one of these things that's like, are we making this way more difficult than it needs to be? Like, was this, like, just a way to start a war? Like, he was Duke Ferdinand. Like, she was Duke Ferdinand. Like, she was just the straw that broke the camel's back. They were just looking for a reason. And he was like, well, they raped her and killed her. So now I'm going to carve her up like she's a pig and send her to 12 tribes. Weird. People are weird. Whole thing's weird. Maybe I will just do the New Testament. Like, I think...
Right.
I'm glad that I did the New Testament first, so I was ready to get into... I'm still not ready to get into this, but...
I don't think if I did the Old Testament, I'd be like, you know what? Maybe being agnostic is the way to go. Because this is a lot.
So, yeah, I think... So...
Weird.
That last one was basically saying, like, symbolism, right? That it's all about symbolism, as we talked about during our brief commercial break. And... yeah, potentially. It's just so much to try to understand. Like,
It's like jarring.
It's so jarring, and like the symbolism isn't super clear, I don't think.
Well, it just seems like there's like 4 different plot points, and you're just not sure, like, what the main. What was the point of the story? Like, was the point of the story like war? Like, they wanted to attack the tribe of Benjamin? Like, is that the point of the story? And all of this stuff was just kind of plot points that were trying to redirect you or like, I just don't get the whole, like, there's so many, like, it is, I understand that editing wasn't a big thing at the time of writing the Bible. Like, I understand that because it is one of these things where in this day and age, any editor would have gotten that story and been like, what is this? What is this point? Like, why do we have this whole section here? It doesn't come up again. Why do we care about to go into the father-in-law's house?
Yeah, I know. There's so many, like, misdirects, I feel like, in this story too. But I do think, like, we also know that the God of the Old Testament was a punishing God. Yeah. Like, he was a very punishing God, and we know, leading up into Judges, we know that Israel had fallen away from God and was no longer keeping God's commandments and laws. And so this could all, like, boil down to, is this just God's punishment on them to literally cut out part of the tribes, part of the family of Israel? Maybe.
This is like they also go to God and they ask, and so it always, like, that to me, like, that puts some symbolism there that I don't know if I like, because to me that, like, sounds like God is like Zeus, like sitting on this major throne that they're able to, that he's accessible to them, that they're just able to go to him and like, well, who do we send first? And he's like, Judah, I don't like Judah right now. Like, go for it. And then they, like, go back to him, and he's like, oh, send 18,000 more, and we'll kill 18,000 more, and that'll be enough to sate my appetite. Right. Like, I don't like... Well, I don't like it.
Having read up this far into the Old Testament recently, oftentimes God is really positioned kind of as Zeus, I would say, in that way. You know, they had the Ark of the Covenant, and God would be present in the Holy of Holies, right, for people, and be able to speak to them at that time. And he was, I don't know, there were a lot of...
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna stick with the New Testament.
Yeah, it was rough.
Skip this whole Old Testament.
Okay, here's another interpretation from the same forum from a user named Nigel J. The Levite did not pursue after the woman, but permitted her to be in her father's house in peace and quietness. These matters of marital separation are not to be dealt with impetuously. If anything, it shows admirable restraint on his part. I do not think it is proper to see fault in this. The house was surrounded by men of Belial, lawless, idolatrous, ungovernable, and violent. It is easy to criticize actions of offering a woman to pacify them. The alternative was the probable death of the entire household. There was no police force. There was none came to help in the midst of a riot. The household were on their own in great danger from an incensed mob. The man arose. That is to say, he was lying down. The text does not say that he had been asleep. No conclusion can be drawn from this. He may have been lying all night on his face praying, for all we know. Fine.
Doubtful.
Maybe. The man left in haste. The place was dangerous. He urged the woman to be going, as it must have immediately seemed that she was sleeping in the porchway. It would not have been safe for him to go out during darkness. Now it was light, and they needed to escape quickly before the men of the place stirred from their night of wickedness and renewed their violence. None answered surely meant she was dead. It was surely a corpse that was transported on the animal, but the Levite was the one who took responsibility for whether life had ceased or not. The narrative does not comment on the competence of his medical decision. The householder would be a witness to the fact of none answered and could affirm that. There is no other evidence, only the medical opinion of the Levite. Thus the accuracy of the narrative, since the Levite cut up the body and must take responsibility for that woman, was indeed deceased. The Levite showed passion, justice, competence, and astuteness in dividing the woman into 12. Each tribe would be under an obligation to return the parts so that a proper Jewish burial could be arranged. No single tribe would be able to ignore the situation. Each single tribe would be absolutely obliged to send representatives, at least to return the body parts. I work, this is Nigel speaking, not Kendra, I work as a security officer and I deal with situations of many kinds. Sometimes I am so frightened that my heart pumps so fast and hard that I am unable to speak, but I have to stand and not let it show. I know that there are times during potentially violent confrontations that the apparently brave response is the worst possible course of action and will result in an escalation to life-threatening scenarios. I cannot see any reason myself to criticize the Levite in any single thing he did. Had the Levite resisted the mob and had the mob killed the Levite, there would have been no report of the appalling situation in that town. The course of action he took was one in which the matter was reported and one in which the nation of Israel intervened and saw justice done. Otherwise, nothing would have happened, and the terrible state of affairs would have continued unabated. Who knows how many visitors to the town had already been murdered by this gang during successive nights of similar conduct.
Interesting. That makes me think a little bit about this whole Luigi Maggiano thing that's going on.
Talk to us about it. I don't know a lot about it.
Oh, well, just that he assassinated one of the CEOs of United Healthcare.
Oh, that's that guy. There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just a lot of people have kind of like rallied behind it, but just saying that because like nothing else was working, that like protest and voting and all those things that like could have helped the situation was not helping, and so it was resorting to violence. Which I really hope that like our society is not going in that direction. But yeah, that's kind of just what happened.
I mean, isn't that what war is? Too, right? Like when nothing else is working, that's the violent response.
Yeah.
I'm just so, oh my God. I was like, the logistics of this whole thing is just so weird. Okay, so you bring her back, you cut her into 12 pieces. You now have single-handedly decided that you want to bring all 12 tribes of Israel back together to answer for this crime. Mm-hmm. And if one tribe doesn't respond, like that's taking a stand. Like, I'll give him that much. That's taking on a pretty, like, that's him definitely standing on his pedestal being like, this is what we're going to do. And if you don't do it, like, they could have easily ignored him.
It happened to be the tribe that that was the tribe of Benjamin was in that area of Gibeah. So like those men belonged to the tribe of Benjamin. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's still like it's one person going to an entire nation saying, because of this crime, all of you now have to band together and go against this. Like, the 11 tribes could have very easily ignored him and just been like, could have very easily taken this stance that we see a lot of times, being like, well, why does this one person matter?
Well, I mean, that makes me think of what Jesus said about, like, if you're sinning, like, if you, what is it, like cutting out your eye. You know, if you're
Despite your face.
Yeah, well,
it's like if your right hand is sitting, like, cut it off, and it's like if your right eye is sitting, like, skip it out. But it's like one of these things where it's just kind of like,
isn't that kind of what they did, right?
It's just like, to me, it's just such a, like, unbelievable situation. Like, there's no indication in the story that he has any power, that he's in any type of situation where he can demand this war because his concubine was raped and killed.
He just got attention by the bold act of sending a body part. Yeah.
And so, and that's what I think, that she was the Duke Ferdinand. Like, that's what I would, like, that's where I make that comparison, because I think that, like, everybody was probably waiting for that tipping point. Everyone was probably, like, wanting, like, I'm sorry, you can't get 11 nations to go to war in a split second unless there's been some planning ahead. Like, there's been some tension leading up to it. World War I, World War II, the Civil War, the American Revolution, it doesn't happen overnight. There were series of events that started very small. There were ripple events that started very small that got bigger and bigger and bigger until a single event set off the entire thing, and that's when wars happen. So to me, this is what I feel like this was. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. This was the Duke Ferdinand that was like, okay, this was the final straw that we were looking for. Like, this is our excuse to then go to war. And God favors it because he says, yeah, go for it. Like, you know, like, send this group and then send this group. And, yeah.
We need to prune. God had to prune a little bit.
A lot of pruning, God.
A lot of pruning. Okay, so one last interpretation from Christine Mafana, a Zimbabwean American, feels much as lost in interpretation due to the lack of understanding what a concubine really is. This section of her interpretation focuses on the translated word prostitution, sometimes adultery or unfaithful. So she draws from the writings of Ken Stone and says Stone examines the selection by focusing on Judges 19:2 and by asking the question how exactly the woman had been unfaithful. The Hebrew version suggests that she had prostituted herself, which implies sexual unfaithfulness. However, the Greek version states instead that the woman became angry. Stone analyzes how the term prostitution can have a different meaning by saying that the woman's prostitution does not refer to literal sexual infidelity, but is a sort of metaphor for the fact that she leaves her husband. The act that she left her husband and returned home is in itself culturally considered unacceptable in this time. The author suggests this may be why such harsh language is used to address the woman. Another question readers may pose when reading this text is why the host decides to offer the women, instead of his male guest. Why not offer a male servant or relative? The host was willing to sacrifice the dignity of the two women for the protection of a male guest. Stone sheds light on why the host chose to do this by saying, apparently the sexual violation of women was considered less shameful than that of men, at least in the eyes of other men. Such an attitude reflects both the social subordination of women and the fact that homosexual rape was viewed as particularly severe, as a particularly severe attack on male honor. It saddens me to think a man would offer his own daughter before putting a male stranger into harm's way. This is a great example of the misogynistic culture and the mistreatment of women in that particular time.
Seriously.
Yeah, but there's so many examples in the Old Testament of horrendous misogyny, of just the value of women being, like, nil.
Well, you see it in the New Testament. It's just refreshing because you see the star player go in the opposite direction.
Absolutely.
Of that. So you still see all this misogyny, you still see all this, like, mistreatment of women, but then you see the star player, Jesus, coming out and being like, nah, that's not the direction we need to go anymore.
I do think there's something interesting to the point that one of the interpreters mentioned about how Israel lost its identity. That Jews in this day and age don't know their tribal affiliation. And there could be something in the symbolism of that. This act was responsible for helping them to lose the identity of their Judaism for the rest of time. Yeah, as God's punishment.
Unfortunately, the Jewish people have gone through that
so
many times over.
Yeah.
You talk about an ethnicity of people, a group of people that have literally been used as scapegoats throughout time. Yeah. Like, it's just ridiculous. That's what my final paper was on as my history major, was on Zionism and the creation of Israel after World War II. And that I had to do some pretty deep dives into Jewish culture, into the creation of the state of Israel and everything. And it was one of these things that, like, I kind of wish, this is almost 20 years ago that I wrote, 18 years ago that I wrote this paper, and I wish I could go to it now 18 years later and do a sequel to it, like a more in-depth version, because at 22 what I wrote was probably so childish in compared to what I know now, and just have through living life and seeing what different cultures go through. The depth of your empathy at this point. It's so, like, at 22, you don't know nothing. You don't know empathy. Like, you don't know anything. You just know how to, like, wake up in time to make it to class after partying all night. That's what you know.
You've lived through some stuff now.
Yeah, you know what Pedialyte does to you. Like, that's what you know. Like, you don't know anything. So, but yeah, it is crazy to think that even in this time, in this day and age, we can look at groups such as the Jewish people, such as the Palestinian people, such as, different tribes in Africa, different Asian tribes that completely, Middle Eastern tribes have completely had lost their identities over, occupation and just, sawing up the globe and everything like that. So it's just crazy to think about.
So, I don't know. God bless you guys for trying. I think this was a really challenging one.
I don't think I want to know.
Yeah, I know. This one's rough, as the last one was too. But yeah,
I know. I don't think these should be help me understand the Bible. I'd be like, why? What is the point of this story?
Why?
This is
why God?
Why is this in here?
So if you guys have any thoughts, any interpretations on this, please share, because I would love to hear a perspective that I might actually be able to wrap my head around for this. It would be incredibly helpful for me. I feel like I'm going to wind up having to write a thesis about this or something once I go to seminary.
Yeah.
God help me. Please don't. Please don't, Father. Anyway, with that, let's close us up in prayer. Who wants to pray?
Ashley.
Kaylee, you never do. You're praying next episode.
Right. Okay, the Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Lord, thank you for giving us people to help to examine the Bible and the stories of the Bible, even if we don't quite understand it. And thank you for the New Testament. Thank you for giving us something that we can't understand.
Praise Jesus.
That, aligns with what we find morally right. But it is your word, and help us to walk into life and to follow your word that we can understand. Okay, it's in your name we pray.
Amen.
God, stop giving us these really tough puzzles.
I don't even know. I gotta pray about that.
I really want just an easy puzzle.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Messy Christian Mamas. You can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook, and Instagram. Until next time, embrace the mess, share the love, and shine your light bright, my friends.